Are you or your clients looking for a regular income solution with compelling returns to diversify your portfolio? If so, Neighborhood Holdings may be a great option for you. Listeners of this podcast will appreciate that public markets can be turbulent and finding a good private credit fund can be tough. But Neighborhood's track record, transparency, and investor alignment sets it apart from the pack. With nearly 10 years of consistent performance and a target net yield of 8 to 10%, Neighborhood has a track record of providing monthly income to investors without the volatility of public markets. How do they do this? Where banks invest in mortgages up to 95% loan to value, they also make borrowers jump through a lot of hoops. Many borrowers in transition aren't able to meet those hoops. Neighborhood has partnered with banks and brokers to provide quality borrowers with temporary financing secured by first mortgages at an average loan to value of less than 60%. Where other mortgage funds might take more risk by lending against construction, bare land, or jumbo loans, Neighborhood is focused on your average residential borrower who owns the average house in the neighborhood. Plus, their variable rate with a floor mortgage pricing benefits investors when interest rates go up and mitigates downside risk. Check out the link in the description or visit neighborhoodholdings.com to view the offering memorandum or speak to your financial advisor for more information. That's neighborhoodholdings.com/Loonie Hour. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this information discussed today is not intended to be or construed as investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets.
The dirty secret is that no one's ever going to get paid back.
People have the shortest memories when it comes to investment.
We just got to get Keith into Bitcoin. Hey, there's a bubble.
Welcome back to the Loonie Hour, episode 186. As always, joined by the three amigos. We got the Boomer over in Halifax, Richard Diaz, Montreal. Habs are out. Dream is over.
The dream is over, but it was a valiant effort, and the Loonie Hour faithful will be happy to know that my hockey analysis ends today. And I'll see you in October with a very young team and lots of promise. It was a good year.
It was a good year.
It was a good year. It was a good year.
How was that? Sam Montembeau was out, so you had that Dobich guy. He's okay.
He's all right, but you can't win with your backup. Now on to Leaf hating. Boo Leafs! They're gonna choke again.
that'd be incredible. Senators, baby. We got
I'm
a lot
not
of
a big fan of Ottawa right now, so I'm not sure I want to cheer for the Ottawa Senators. But I will say I'm not cheering for the Leafs either, so I'm in a bit of a pickle.
Keith, what's going on?
I don't know how to react to any of that. So that's
This is hockey, Keith. This is our national sport. They play it on ice with sticks and a little vulcanized piece of rubber.
Elbows up.
I played a lot of hockey. I was a very good average hockey player when I was 12 years old. Hey, so cool thing for me at Easter time of year, Mrs. Icecap loves to hide the little Easter eggs, like the Cadburys. If you can see them on the show, these little ones.
Aren't you a little old to be doing Easter egg hunts there?
You're never too old to find chocolate, Steve. So we go around the house, me and the kids, and we're finding them, and Willis the dog and everything. And the other day I was looking around for something to snack on, and I was in the pantry. Guess what I found in the pantry?
Easter eggs. Oh,
that
my
mother
God.
load. So those listening, I found a huge bag of these Cadbury mini eggs.
Those are good.
Purple.
Those are
the little
very good.
bunny rabbit. See the bunny rabbit, Rich? Do you see it?
I see the bunny rabbit. The Portuguese actually love eating rabbit, by the way.
I can eat these things for a while. So I think now these might be ahead of the lemon loaf.
Oh, you're on a diet.
For a little
you're
bit.
off the lemon loaves. Now you're back onto chocolate. What's going on?
Yeah, I think I'm on the seafood diet these days.
I see what you did there.
What?
There's your first dad joke of the show.
Yeah, that's very
okay.
good.
Rich doesn't get it. Steve
No, I
does.
did not get that.
Okay, let's keep rolling. Rolling.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously this is we'll do the election recap. This will be the election recap show. We've got some other stuff going on, including some energy mishaps over in Europe. We've got US GDP numbers. We've got some updates, sort of what's happening in financial markets. So, but
Canadian GDP numbers too.
we had Canadian GDP. Oh, see, I'm out of the loop. We got a little bit of housing data too. So there's quite a bit to talk on. Obviously, first and foremost, Canadians have reelected the Liberals for a fourth term. So probably no surprise to anyone listening. Obviously, Mark Carney got back in. We had again, we'll kind of get to like some of the results and all that, but we had two guests on in particular prior to the election. Number one was Main Street Research. They turned out to be the most accurate pollster based on the election results. So for anyone that was listening to the Loonie Hour, you kind of got the early seat into how that all played out. And we had Doomberg, Rich, which we'll kind of get into, because I think Doomberg's actually called this really well. We got a lot of feedback from that episode saying, oh, hope this guy's wrong, but, it was a really interesting conversation. And essentially, I would really encourage people to go back to listen to that interview because it's all coming home to roost.
Yeah.
You like that one, Keith?
Yeah, that's what chickens do.
Yeah.
Roost.
And so basically, he said the fix is
I
in.
couldn't hit my unmute button then to comment. I do get it. Yeah. So why don't you paraphrase like for 30 seconds? Why?
I have it in front of me.
what
Do you want me to
Doomberg
read?
said.
Do you want me to read what he said?
Yeah, a quick 30, just to refresh
Just two
everyone's-
sentences. It's just that here's how it's likely to play out in the weeks and months ahead. Carney will be elected prime minister on April 28th by comfortable margin. Okay, he was wrong about the margin. We'll talk about that in a minute. Alberta's Premier Smith will trigger a constitutional crisis, getting warmer, providing cover for Carney to strike a grand bargain and finally resolve long-standing tensions between provinces and Ottawa, large infrastructure, etc. And then he amended that by saying, as soon as the election was over, he would strike a deal with Donald Trump, which I think, if you heard some of the comments from a couple of days ago, is more likely than not to happen very, very soon. So I have some views on that. But that was basically Doomberg's little bit of a wrap up for what Doomberg said.
We'll unpack that a little bit more. So just to emphasize here, so the election turnout, 19.6 million Canadians cast their ballots, resulting in a voter turnout of 68.7%, which again, I think is still too low, but it is what it is. The results, Keith and Rich, there was Carney had, so of all the elections, obviously Canada's population has grown, but most votes in the history of Canada, number one, Mark Carney, most votes ever. Number two, Pierre Poilievre, same election. So this really was an election of two parties, two candidates. And basically what happened was, under normal circumstances, I think either party would have normally have garnered a majority, but basically the NDP was the big loser.
And so was the Bloc. The Bloc lost a lot of seats too.
Bloc lost a lot of seats, but I think we can all agree that NDP was probably the biggest surprise.
Yep.
Rich, what did they end up with? Nine.
So they got 6.3% of the vote, and they got 7 seats. And the Bloc also got I messed up. They 6.3% of the vote, and they got 7 seats. And the Bloc Québécois also got 6.3% of the vote and got 22 seats, which gives you insight on the seat map and how screwed up that is. And just so, but there's a couple other wrinkles too, which is, for all the criticism that's been levied towards Pierre Poilievre, he increased the Conservative seat count to 144. So they were also, a fairly big winner in this. It was a weird election where I think everybody's a little bit disappointed, is the way I would describe it, right? Because on the left, you have the Liberals. They didn't get the majority they want. I think, and we're going to talk about how they won it in a second, but, they got a good turnout. They kept a bunch of really important parts of the country, but they lost others, and they underperformed in places that I think that they were expecting to do well. The Conservatives can say that did a decent job. They got the youth to turn out. They absorbed all of Southern Ontario. They did really well in British Columbia. Increased their vote count, increased their popular vote count, and yet Pierre Poilievre lost his seat, which I think is a bit of a red herring. And yet they didn't get a majority after being up 90. Having a 90% probability of winning. So and then the rest is whatever, but it's just kind of funny.
So you think the Liberals were a little disappointed?
Well, that they didn't get a majority?
I
When
bet you
every
those
pollster-
guys were popping the corks
No,
all
I
night long.
sorry, that's
They
not what
had
I,
it.
of course they're happy they won. I just mean whether it's Poly Market or our pollster that we had on the show, everybody was convinced.
Yeah,
they were
there
gonna get a
was
majority.
a lot of pollsters that were indicating a liberal majority. So they fell obviously just short of that. Now, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a political expert or analyst, but I mean, I think that a little bit of research helps, and it's interesting now because I think what are they, Rich? I think they're three seats short. So
Yeah.
there's been some discussion now again of the NDP, which lost official party status. So for those that aren't aware of what that is, essentially it means like official party status means like once you're an official party, you basically get excess or additional funding to sort of support your party. You get guaranteed time to speak in parliament. You get to be a part of you're just a lot
The
more
Privy
active.
Council. So
Privy
there's
Council.
there's secrets and lies that you're exposed to and informed of.
So the NDP
Sounds
lost
like the
their
Loonie Hour in some way.
Yeah. So
You're
they
part of the
lost their
club.
official party status. So now basically the Liberals are like, okay, well, we're short of a majority. Do we again re-engage with the NDP? There's been talk about some of these NDP members of parliament that were elected walking over to the Liberal Party. So basically, which apparently you can do, which is kind of crazy. I didn't know that until recently.
So we're properly fucked, is what you're
Well,
trying to say.
it's crazy. You can campaign. You can campaign as an NDPer, and then you just like, actually, I'm liberal now, and you just walk over. And
But that
become
happens
part-
all the time, like
Yeah.
even in provincial politics. I know in Nova Scotia over the last year, I think several people have, they say crossing the floor. They literally get up with their suitcase, their book bag, and they scurry over, and then
bag of Easter eggs.
and then it
That's
falls.
right.
Yeah, you get all that stuff. I think that the Liberals were astounded. They were ecstatic because they're in control again. The arch enemy Polyev didn't win his seat. Carney was getting phone calls all night long from so many international phone numbers. All that stuff was going on, and it is what it is. I don't. We'll have a conversation about if this is better or worse where we're going with it. But let's be realistic here. I know Polyev. He stated he wants to stay on as leader of the
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Conservatives.
we'll
stay
we'll
on.
get into the sort of antics of it. But he lost his seat, right?
Yep.
So now he has to basically in a by-election. Is my understanding is he has to go and basically run in a by-election and win a seat there. Or I think, Rich, am I correct in saying someone can give him a seat?
No, they have to I think you're right the first time. Somebody has to resign or step down from their seat, and then
He'll run in the by-election.
I think so, yes.
But he's
Which is
basically
not, again, in the parliamentary system, is not at all unheard of or rare. This has happened many
yeah.
times.
But basically, he's kind of like somewhat like muzzled in terms of like.
Oh yes, very much so. He literally cannot speak in parliament because he's not a member of parliament.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know when the next by-election would be in terms of where he ends up going, but it seems. I mean, early days suggest that he'll stay on as head of the party. That's most people have come out on the Conservative Party suggesting that they're backing him and they want him to stay on. So
My view on that is whether he does or doesn't stay on or whatever, I just don't think we should listen to the CBC or the Liberal Party's insights on what the Conservative leader should be doing. Can we agree on that being something we should just bin?
seems
Sorry.
rational. But this happened to happened to
So what
Harper
I
in
expect, though,
2004, no?
Sorry, Keith?
I don't remember. What I expect, though, I don't think it's going to be as clean as what's being suggested here.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the Blue Party right now. Whether Polyev comes back or not, I'll believe it when I see it. Until now, he's not there. So you have to get that figured out. When I see whatever kind of razor thin majority the Liberals have, it's razor thin, Rich. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like
But that's what I was
anything
saying.
could snap that in two. I wouldn't be. I think one of us suggested this a few weeks ago. We could have another election within 12 months.
Please no. I don't want to talk about politics.
Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you that's potentially where it could go. And then we do have the Alberta and possibly Saskatchewan experience coming up as well. And so
which
it's,
we'll get into.
yeah, we'll get into all that. We're just going.
Couple interesting notes there, Keith, on again on Polyev losing his seat. So the total number of candidates running in each riding. So Jagmeet Singh had 4 options in his riding. Mark Carney had 5. Pierre Polyev had 91.
Sorry, how many?
91.
Like 9-1?
So there's 91 names on the ballot.
There were 91 independents, and then plus the other 4 people. I think it was probably 95 running in total.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so if you were going to the
That's
ballot
ridiculous.
box, and I believe it's Carleton, I mean, it would have taken you a couple minutes just to sort through all the names.
So how long was the paper?
I don't know. The paper was like apparently egregiously long. I don't know. It's totally ridiculous. It's like,
I mean, that's obviously like not election interference per se, but how is that right?
I think there was something I was reading about, like they were trying to get political reform in that sort of pocket. I don't know. I don't know all the details of it, but I just thought it was pretty funny. 91.
Well, I
people on
imagine
the
there are a lot of
ballot.
other ridings with 90 plus independent running as well. If you go show that to me, then I'll say there's nothing to see here. But
I mean,
so what else do you want to go? I mean, the election's over, guys. So
I know, but there's one thing I need to just say, which is to quote Mark Twain, which is, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled, which is one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain. And the reason I bring that up is because when you look at what was the most important factors when deciding the vote, there's a great chart, which we'll share. Thank you, Jeff. And overwhelmingly, people over the age of 60 said that dealing Donald Trump was far more important than the following: making housing more affordable, growing the economy, making Canada a better place to live. And I think it's just been an incredible bait and switch. I think the Liberal Party, we have to give them credit. They used the boogeyman of Donald Trump as effectively as any political strategy I've ever seen. And I think before the Stanley Cup is handed out, long before the Stanley Cup is handed out, there will be a deal with the big bad boogeyman from down south, and all of this will be forgotten. And this should teach me to be much more cynical about the world, but probably won't be. It won't be.
I mean, I feel like,
welcome aboard, Rich. Come to my side.
Keith, I feel like there's got to be like a great textbook example here of like a mass psychosis around Trump.
Well,
Canada,
everyone, and we've talked about this before as well, and this has been going on for a long time. Whenever you have a problem domestically, you have to find an external source to blame for a distraction. I mean, that's everyone does that over time. And
that's true.
for Canada, it just happened to be you had probably the most polarizing figure in our lifetime. Was there. That's it. So if I was running the Liberal Party campaign strategy, I would have done the exact same thing. I would have said, hey, he's the problem and I'm not the old guy. That's all you do. Like, it's all just emotional,
just remember,
left side brain thinking. So you distract everyone from the domestic problems with an outside source. And, that's what happened here.
So, yeah, just before Trump got back into the White House, I think in January there. So at the end of December, basically, every single polling firm had the Conservatives, I think, all north of 200 seats. So basically like super majority, blue wave across the country. And obviously the timing of Trump and Carney coming in shows that, I guess, no lead is safe. And I think there's a good case study to be done there.
Unless you're playing the Montreal Canadiens, then it's pretty safe.
But so there you go. So we're now in this Rich, I want to add one more point to this. So I'm just reading like all the takes on like Twitter. I mean, some of them are good, some are bad, but I don't know. Some of them I just like, honestly, I was probably laughing for a good day. But the people of Canada basically, I think they forced and basically demanded an election. People were just so tired of Trudeau, right? Like everybody just, you look at it and people wanted an election, and only to vote in the same party and a lot of the same actors.
all of the same actors. I think everybody in the cabinet was reelected. And of course, we never talk about Gerald Butts and Katie Telford. Katie Telford was the longest cabinet secretary, serving cabinet secretary ever. I think she's also back there.
So then the two that sit out for me. So Sean Fraser.
Remind us who Sean Fraser
Sean
is?
Fraser was the immigration minister. So the guy that was responsible for allowing north of 1 million people per year for 2 years straight.
Almost 3, yeah.
Almost 3. Had the immigration file, destroyed like one of the best, most renowned immigration systems in the world. And he got reelected. He stepped aside because he's like, well, this is a sinking ship.
At least he wasn't involved with housing. So that's...
Yeah, and then he became the housing minister and obviously.
And what happened with housing? Did housing became more affordable? Yes.
I mean, it's becoming more affordable now because you have a housing bust that's unfolding. Yes, but so I guess we can give him some credit there. But anyways, he destroyed the immigration file, and then you had Chrystia Freeland, who I would argue destroyed our public finances as finance minister, brought in the increased capital gains tax, and when she got back in. So yeah, I mean, the two people that I think probably shouldn't be rewarded due to poor results were handily voted back in. So there you go. That's the state of our country. And of course, the
sour grape, Steve. You should have done something about it, man.
Well, let's quote one more old dead person, which is the government you elect is the government you deserve. And that's Thomas Jefferson. And with that, can we please move away from politics for a little while?
We're out. We're out of the federal elections now. But again, to the earlier discussion there on Alberta. So to Doomberg's point, Danielle Smith, who's been on the show, she's unveiled major updates to the Citizen Initiative Act. So now only 177,000 signatures are needed to trigger a referendum on Alberta independence. That's down from 600,000. And plus the signature collection period will extend from 90 days to 120 days. So kind of
they already cracked 200, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. They already cracked 200.
So there you go. You're setting the stage for sort of the Alberta separatist movement. And so if Doomberg is right, there will be a deal struck that will allow hopefully the expansion of Alberta's oil and gas sector. We'll see. A lot of moving pieces with the block. Rich, I don't know if you wanted to chat on that, but
well, I mean, I think people like just sort of people take, I think, Yves Blanchette, who I think is actually probably my favorite politician, even though I disagree with virtually everything he stands for. I actually really like him. He's actually very funny and very sharp and very sarcastic, and I can't help but like him, even though like I said, I disagree.
He doesn't mince his words.
No, he doesn't. He's very funny. I think he's a very funny guy. But the thing is, like, people, I think it's just a lever. People don't like it, but it's just a lever to extract concessions. And I would argue that a lot of provinces in Canada could probably take a page out of this guy's book. And I think that's exactly what Danielle Smith is going to do. I think that they're going to just use the power that they have, whether it's, money or oil or votes or whatever, to extract concessions to get what their constituents what they in their mind think is what their constituents deserve or want or whatever. And I think that that's the way you should see it. So when he says that, oil is not part of Quebec's future and blah, 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 I mean, it's obviously bullshit. And we're going to talk about energy policy in a minute, but he's just trying to extract concessions.
Yeah. So anyways, I hope Doomberg's right. And I hope that, Carney's got his work cut out for him to keep the provinces happy and obviously to keep the U.S. somewhat happy. And so we'll see. Hopefully for everyone's sake here, it turns out to be a successful term. We'll see.
Ever been abroad and needed Wi-Fi? Download Saley. Tired of telecom oligopolies ripping you off? Download Saley. Want to avoid sketchy SIM sellers at the airport? Download Saley. Saley might be the only travel app you need. It provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. It's easy to use, affordable, and reliable all over the world. Saley is the modern, seamless way to get connected without the need for physical SIM cards. With eSIM technology, you can instantly activate service from anywhere in the world. No more waiting in line for a local SIM or dealing with expensive roaming charges. Saley offers flexible plans to fit your needs, whether you're traveling for work or leisure. Plus, you can switch between networks in just a few taps, ensuring you always get the best coverage at the best rates. Whether you're a frequent traveler, an expat, or just someone who wants more flexibility with their phone, Saley's got you covered. No hidden fees, no contracts, just affordable, reliable data wherever you go. Visit saley.com/Loonie Hour for 15% off.
So without further ado, Rich, we've got the energy policy side.
Yay!
And again, this is like going back to the conversation we had with Doomberg, right? Which is discussing renewable energy and the issues that they bring that I think often don't get discussed. So, Rich, I don't know if you want to talk us through what just happened over in Spain.
Fine. I'll try not to enjoy this as much as I am because but I mean, it's not, I mean, in some ways it's funny to me because we've been talking about this for a long time. Doomberg and other really smart people, in this case, Javier Blay, who's a Bloomberg energy and commodity expert. That's a book I read. You should read his book, The World for Sale. And basically the story is that Spain had a massive, virtually country crippling blackout. And not just Spain, actually Portugal, because the Iberian Peninsula is effectively a separate grid, much like Texas is a separate grid from the US. The Iberian Peninsula is a separate grid from the rest of Europe. And this happened because of a spike / problem with solar electricity. So at the time, solar was producing about 55% of all the electricity. You had wind, I think, in the mid to high teens. And then the rest of the grid, you had wind at 12. So solar at 60, wind at 12, nuclear at 11, and then the rest, made up the rest. But the problem is you had basically a problem with the solar. There was either solar flare or something. It spiked. And the rest of the grid was not able to absorb the fluctuation in the increase in energy. And what I mean by absorb, and this, I'm not going to get into a big long-winded and garbled view of how energy grids work, but in effect, there's a word called inertia. And when you think of grids, you have to think of frequencies. So electricity is, obviously electrons moving about, but it's moving about at a certain frequency. And the way that the entire grid is kept at it all works on one specific frequency. And in Canada and the US, I think it's like 60 hertz. In Spain, it's 50. But anyways, and when there's a drop off in electricity from one part of the grid or another, when people say inertia, the physical weight of the hundreds, if not thousands, of turbines gets pushed and pulled in order to equilibrate the frequency of the entire grid. Now that's like mind-blowing stuff, but literally, and I'll wrap it up quickly, is that if the frequency slows in one part, that slowing affects the literal inertia, so the mass of a turbine hundreds of miles away. And what they try to do is they have to sync all the turbines everywhere to be on the same frequency. Anyways, I'm sure I screwed that up, but the point is that when you use renewables, you don't have that mass or inertia, and it screws up with how a grid is resilient to spikes and or drops in electricity and power. I hope I did a good job explaining that. And so the problem is the more renewables you have on the grid and the less that you have these like old legacy power generators, the more susceptible your grid is to those spikes. And that's exactly what happened, and why Doomberg and other people say that renewables is sort of a cul-de-sac when it comes to electricity and energy grids. Did I do an okay job explaining that?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Rich, why don't you just share though what happened to the layperson in Spain and Portugal?
Oh yeah,
when it happened,
right?
Yeah.
So because the grid fell, so there was supposed to be about like 20 or 30 gigawatts, I say, in Spain. That fell to about 12. And because it fell so hard, you have to do what's called a black start. And so you have to restart the grid, get everything back on the right frequency. And that can take literally tens of hours. And that's exactly what happened. So you had more than half of, I think almost all the country, half the power generation, but almost all of the country was in the dark for about 18 hours. So think about that. And this is no joke. Like all the high-speed rail, which I'm a big fan of, elevators, defibrillators, not defibrillators, what do you mean? Dialysis machines. You had the internet was down. You couldn't do transactions. Like virtually every single thing that is linked to the grid, because it was such a structural and wide-ranging blackout, and because it required something called a black start. Maybe I'm screwing the name up, but it was just intense dislocation in our civilization. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And it's a function of the fact that our grid is not designed and or sufficiently calibrated for renewables.
So they received net zero before anyone else.
The pictures are apocalyptic, though. It was pretty wild. Like people that were like on these, I guess, high speed rails, where the trains basically just like stopped mid track, and people got out like in the middle of nowhere with like their bags and just like standing around.
Right, but also because they have to do this thing called the black start, which is you have to restart every single. It's not just about restarting. It's about getting all of the turbines and all of the electricity generation things, structure, infrastructure, all back on the same frequency. And then that in and of itself takes power. And then you have to link it to the grid sufficiently. But the problem is when you turn, like, it's like, when you have a breaker at your house, your fridges are on, like you have to meet the extra demand to turn things back on that actually normally take very little to have a run rate. Does that make sense? Like this is a very complicated thing. I'm clearly out of my depth here, but the moral of the story is renewables are the reason this is happening, and the grids are not sufficiently designed, or they're not.
Rich,
yeah.
This was because of a burst of solar coming in, or solar not going in?
No, it was a burst of solar going in. It was two things, I think. One is because the solar was already very, very high. Listen, 2 weeks ago, there was an article saying Spain was running 100% on renewables. And in some sense, that should be lauded. It's amazing. And when this happened, it was 60.64. So, but the problem is there's no contingency is maybe the word I'm looking for.
And this is what Doomberg discussed as well.
Exactly what he said, basically.
Yeah, he's exactly 100% correct with that.
It's just funny. And like, the reason I think it's funny is two reasons. One, everyone is turning themselves into a pretzel to blame everything other than what electrical engineers have been talking about for literally decades. And so that's why I think it's funny. And two, because it was like the timing was perfect, because 2 weeks ago they literally were bragging about having 100% renewables. And it's just, I don't know, sometimes life is ironic, I suppose. But anyway, there's my
Javier Blay, to Rich's point, has been tweeting it out, I think rather succinctly on Twitter there. So highly would encourage you to go check out his threads. He's got some good charts, some data points, exactly kind of breaking it all down. So again, Bloomberg author and book author as well. Smart guy.
And for those, two more things. If you guys want, because I probably screwed that explanation up, I would just recommend you go check out 2 YouTube videos from my two of my favorite YouTube channels outside of the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap and the Loonie Hour, which is Practical Engineering. So Practical Engineering is a YouTube channel with like literally thousands of engineering videos that are like in depth. They're about half an hour long, so only nerds like me watch them. But there's one called "What is a Black Start of a Power Grid," which is really cool and explains all the things that I screwed up. And the second one, which is from Real Engineering, which is another excellent engineering YouTube channel that has all kinds of different things, not just energy, and it's the problem with wind energy. And those two will explain and fill the major gaps in my story, basically.
So there you go. Spain and Portugal, the first net zero countries. Keith, what else have we been keeping an eye on? You keep an eye on US GDP was out this week.
Yeah, just one more question though for Rich. So to bring this back into Canada, is there any of our grids, sort of provincially, is that right? Or nationally might be have a similar risk to what just happened in Spain and Portugal?
Funnily enough, no. And the reason that's true is just because, and I'm desperately trying to find the chart quickly here. It's because so much of our grid is just the boring stuff that everybody seems to be unimpressed by. And that's like, so I think 60% of our electricity production is hydro. And again, so electricity generation, so 60% is hydro, 15% is natural gas, 14 point something is nuclear, and then wind is 6.3, coal at 5.3, and then the rest. And then the first three, hydro, natural gas, and nuclear, I hope I don't screw this up, have these gigantic, massive, using the word mass as in heavy, turbines. And it's their inertia and the spinning and the weight that can help absorb the changes in that frequency, which is where these problems come from. I hope that made sense.
There was actually, Rich, there's been some issues. There was actually issues in January of last year in Alberta, actually.
Right.
So Alberta experienced a record high electricity demand as they went into an extreme cold snap, sudden loss of 3,000 megawatts of wind and solar generation, along with unexpected outages at their thermal generation facilities, prompted a grid alert. So they've, some minor issues there, but.
Well, just one more thing, just in the interest of balance, because I know there's some people who would vehemently disagree with my view. And I think that's fair. And they would say, one is this is a relatively new technology and we just need to spend more money retrofitting the grids. And indeed, we are. And another counterpoint is saying, well, Rich, there's been blackouts, massive blackouts in legacy electricity grids. 2003, I think there was one in Canada. We had the ice storm, which I got wrong. It's not 1994, it was 1998. So there was, there's blackouts. There have been blackouts. There's rolling blackouts in South Africa, for crying out loud, and they only have fossil fuels as their energy. Although I don't think you should compare South Africa with industrialized countries. In my view, I think the real issue is the people have let ideology around climate change and renewables. Remember, Spain is shutting down its nuclear power plants. So they've let ideology trump engineering engineering and physics. And I think that when in the battle between ideology and physics, I think physics is going to win most of the time.
Math is undefeated. That's what I like to say.
Math is undefeated. But anyway, but there are people who disagree with me, so I think it's fair to just point that out.
Well, Keith, over to the GDP stuff.
So now we're on to GDP. So we got all the political stuff is done. Rich, I loved your explanation, description of what happened with the electricity side in Spain. That was fun.
I hope it was okay.
Yeah, and now we're transitioning, for financial markets and economic stuff. We're trying to get back to a more normal period, and we're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer. And what I mean by that, so we had the American GDP come out yesterday, and the headline number was
Are you asking? Negative.
It was negative 0.3, I think it was, right? And the estimates were all over the place. I don't think anyone had the Atlanta Now GDP, I think they had a really absurd estimate that was really low. And the New York Fed estimate was incredibly high. Everyone missed. But let's just go through the number, because the headline number, it immediately shouted, oh no, the Americans are going into recession, that this is horrible. And then they want to blame it on a lot of different things. But if you break apart how GDP is calculated, one of the key contributors is government spending. So when your government runs a deficit, so they borrow and they spend more and more money, that adds to GDP. And that's what happens with it. American government spending was less in Q1 than it was in Q4. And could be a number of reasons tied to it. Maybe the whole Doge, initiative that helped as well to take money out of the system. But that contributed about minus zero point 0.3 to GDP. So remember, the overall number was minus 0.3. Minus 0.3, so basically all of that was explained away by the less government spending. The big one, though, was imports. So for net exports for a country, if you're selling more than you're buying, that's positive for your GDP. So in Canada, Rich, what do we have? Are we a net exporter or importer?
We're almost exactly in balance. And do you know why?
Why?
Because of oil.
Okay, won't go back there.
Sorry. Carry on.
Because of what's happening with the tariff wars for the Americans, a lot of companies and entities and households, they bought in advance of new tariffs coming on. So because of the increase in imports, so people buying stuff, buying new iPads or whatever they're buying all over the place, that increase in imports, that contributed to a minus 5% number for GDP. So stay with us. So the number was minus 0.3, but minus 0.3 plus minus 5 was from government spending, which was a temporary effect, and the surge in imports, which was minus 5. So my point is that it's highly likely that Q2 GDP can reverse a lot of this number. So the American economy, I think it is going to decline as we get going, but it didn't come to this sudden abrupt, stop. The key number to look at was consumer spending, and that was about a 4% annual rate in Q4. But for Q1, it dipped down to 1.8. So, it got chopped in half almost. That's a key one. That tells you consumers are starting to spend a bit less. But so the bottom line is that don't get too worked up believing the economy in the US just fell off a cliff. It was really some unusual activity, and a lot of it should reverse itself for Q2. If it does the whole thing, we'll see. But
So you're saying it's transitory.
Yeah, maybe.
I got you this time. You got me last time. I got you this time.
Yeah, I know. You're good at that. But from an investment perspective, no one was really getting too, upset with the number because it's not a clean number. After next quarter, then we should start to, and we get monthly data coming in, then the world should get a bit more on track to where we're headed, from a realistic perspective. Does that make sense, Steve? Is that what you've seen as well?
Is anyone getting upset about Canada?
No, Orange Man bad.
No, GDP.
Well, I think the problem is because it's a monthly series. I'm of the view that to calculate a 42 million person, 3 trillion economy monthly is a bit of a stretch, but it did technically decline slightly.
And I feel like, Rich, I feel like none of the tariff uncertainty is really in the numbers yet. This is
not
February. This is February, right? I think in terms of, what a lot of these companies are doing today is not necessarily laying people off, but they've just kind of paused hiring and they're waiting to sort of see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, which can have its own effect on.
It's not a complete wash yet. I agree with that, but we remember the trend leading into all this. The trend was deteriorating for a lot of economies in a lot of different markets. So I think the message today is don't get too distracted by all the noise that we're going to start to see with numbers. But one of the great things now is you look at what companies are announcing, towards the rest of the year, and you're starting to see some big layoff announcements for the big US firms.
Is that because of the tariffs, or again, is this because of the trend that was happening before?
I think it was a bit of both, probably more what was happening before. But if you're a company and say you're all, you were fat and happy for a number of years, making a lot of money, and all of a sudden you're bloated and you say, oh boy, we got to dial this back. But how do we do that without attracting attention to ourselves? It goes back to the Canadian political strategy. You find an outside enemy to blame it on. So this right now with the tariff war and all that's happening, if you're a big company, and you're saying, hey, it's time to trim some fat here, You just blame it on tariffs. Hey, we need to do this because of the tariffs, and no one's going to get mad at you. Like your stock price is not going to get whacked too hard for it.
There's some interesting data coming out of China just on the tariff stuff. China's city level road congestion in April was down 11% compared to last year.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of good like freight data. Obviously, freight data in the US is falling significantly too, Rich. I don't know if you've been following that story.
Well, the story I've seen, and it's tough to get a feel for it, is that there's a lot of shipping containers basically all milling about outside of Shanghai and other. So Shanghai is one of the largest ports in the world, if not the largest port in the world. Anyway, and there's amazing data. So for people who don't know, every single major boat in the world, and even small ones, have like transponders, and all those transponders are linked via satellite, and they're all on these websites. And you go on the website and you see like a big picture of the world, and these little tiny little triangles are different colors, and they're all moving one way and the other way. And you can see the shipping lanes, and you can see they're all congregated. They're around Saudi Arabia, obviously for the oil, and through the Suez Canal, and around the Horn of Africa, et cetera, et cetera. And what people are saying is like they're all sort of there's too many of them basically in China around where they would normally be not unloading, loading, and then going to places like the port of LA and the Los Angeles, the port of Los Angeles, which is the biggest shipping.
Yeah, so the port of Los Angeles says shipping activity should drop. It will drop 35% over the next couple of weeks.
That seems a lot. That seems like a lot, but
That's a lot. That is.
I'm surprised they said that number.
That's what they said. Yeah. So it's Port of LA.
So you have that happening, and you said the on-road traffic was 5% lower year over year.
10% lower in China.
10% lower, and I'm pretty sure the Chinese Communist Party, commies. I think they affirmed their GDP growth was at 5% or 4% or something. What was the number?
It's always at 5 or whatever.
Yeah, I know. It's just magical how that always.
It's always at 5. No joke. That's not hyperbole. It's like literally always 5.0%.
But one thing they do that people like us, I pick up on it because I'm smart. But we're used to waiting for the GDP number to come out, which is a result of what the activity was. Yeah. What the Chinese Communist Party, what they do, they say our target is 5%. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they hit it or not, but we always hear the interpret it the opposite way.
But there's other sort of indicators that tell you that the manufacturers in the US are not happy. And that's things like the ISM. We haven't talked about it, the Fusion Index, in a long time. For those new to the Loonie Hour, I'm obsessed with diffusion indexes, and I talk about them on my first date at any opportunity available. And so you can see that there's the real weakness there too. So I think that's the problem, Keith. It's going to be, you mentioned the word noise, and like all these. I think that's what we're going to see over the next little while, because I don't think anyone really understands. But I can tell you, business people are not happy.
Yeah, so let's just sort of let's stay on this theme now for a second, but sort of bring it over to some of the financial markets as a way to, because financial markets are real time. You're living in real time. They're always trying to adjust to reflect, opportunity as well as risk. And remember when all this stuff started, Steve? Remember the 10-year in the U.S., Steve? It went from around 4% up to 4.5%. Very quickly. Yep. Is that where the 10-year, like 50 basis points,
Yep.
Rich.
It was I'm looking at it right now.
Just like that. Can you hear it?
I know. And it was because the microphones have a noise suppression. Anyway, never mind.
Is it okay? But but at the time, the thinking was, wow, it's going to go to 5, it's going to go to 6. The American Treasury market, it's crashing. Meanwhile, everyone else's 10-year yield is also going higher at the same time. So we went from 4 to 4.5%, which is a huge move, everyone, in the bond world. That's a very aggressive move. And now all of a sudden, the yield has gone from 4.5 back down to 4.2. So it hasn't fully recovered everything, but we're starting to recalibrate. Should long yields be higher than they were before the tariffs? Yeah, absolutely, because it's likely going to be a slower growth coming in, but stickier inflation. We have that theme going on. And then one of my favorite metrics, which It's pretty hard to talk about it for about 15 years. It was credit spreads because they weren't doing anything, right? It was like in the movie Canadian Bacon. You guys see that one with John Candy?
I'm gonna no.
No. Anyway, the guy who was running
I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it, Keith, but
Okay, so
I know
what,
I know what you're talking about. That's an iconic movie.
Yeah, of course it is.
Guy lives under a rock.
But Alan Alda, Canadian guy, he president, he need to find a reason to invade someone to make a distraction from what was happening in America. And he goes to the CIA building, and every agent had a desk with a country flag that they were covering, and there was nothing going on. Everyone was weak, and then back in the corner of the room was this guy there. It was like literally cobwebs, everything all around his place, and he said, "Hey, who do you cover?" He said, "Canada." He said, "Anything happening there?" He said, "Yeah, you need to be aware of." There's a lot of irony going on here, but I forget what my point was. Yes, I
Talking about
remember
credit
now.
spreads blowing out after a long time.
Yeah.
Flat.
Anyway, for that movie, Canadian Bacon, after a long time, they just figured, hey, maybe we should look at Canada for credit spreads. Now they're back in style. Cool people talk about credit spreads again.
Yeah.
But when the tariff story initially broke, the Canadian credit spreads, they blew out. That's what we would say. They got worse when you think of it that way. And then they bounced back down again a little bit with the 10-year, but now they've started to creep higher again.
Yep.
So that means that credit markets, people who would lend money to people or big pension funds who buy the debt from governments or other companies and stuff like that, they're now saying, hey, wait a second. All of a sudden, we're a bit more concerned that we may not get our money back. And that's one of the first clues you should look at to see if are we going to recession or not? And then, of course, people say, hey, well, the US GDP number was horrible. We are in a recession. And I'm telling you, well, maybe, but don't take that data point for it. But continue to watch credit spreads. And then, of course, when banks start to announce their earnings coming up. So I'm excited now because credit spreads are blowing out. Let's see what happens with banks and their provisioning for loan losses on their earnings coming up.
Canadian banks.
Yeah, and American as well. You got to do everyone because they're all, interconnected.
It's a fun story on the Canadian bank side. It's a good chart from Bob Secamano showing cumulative national house price declines. So this is the decline since the peak of February 2022. It's the largest national house price decline from its peak. Going back to data, the last steepest correction was back in 1989 when national house prices dropped about 13%. And right now we're at about 15% decline from peak nationally. So there you go.
This is national for US market?
No, this is Canada.
Oh, for Canada. Yeah.
I have a question though. Is this you've mentioned this before, so I just want to just double check. Is this house price index like dominated by Toronto and the GTA, etc.?
Yeah. Toronto and Vancouver make up like the majority of the index, right? So
okay. So we need to be careful though when we
you need to be careful. I mean, like obviously, right? You look at the suburbs of the GTA compared to let's say Calgary.
Montreal? Yeah.
Calgary, I mean, Calgary home prices are up year over year. The GTA is down whatever it is, 10, 15%, 20% from the peak.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously, yeah, I mean, they say real estate's hyper local. I think that's case to be made, okay. But I mean, I'm careful to say the same words that was it Ben Bernanke said about the U.S. housing bust.
What did he say?
Remember, he's like, there's never ever been a national real estate correction or
real estate has never declined at a national level.
That's what he said. Yeah. Something like that.
It's always a domestic problem, that's you. So if Alberta separates or discusses, is the local real estate market going to go up or down?
Well, yeah, because I'm moving there.
Yeah, me too. I'm a buyer.
That's a good question. I honestly have no idea how that would play out. But I mean, yeah, all I can tell you is what's happening here locally is it's a mess. It's
but that's going to be an interesting. We'll have a bit of fun with this. Just to have conversations about it. And I bet you there'll be a certain percentage of the population in Alberta saying, I'm out of here. And then you get some other yahoos like Richard say, hey, I'm coming, I'm going to run over and buy up something. But from a serious perspective, serious conversation, these are the conversations that will take place. So if Alberta does go down this road of having a referendum, not only will like individuals or families make a decision to just to stay or to leave or to to leave Kitsilano and move over there, but companies have to make the same decision as well, whether they're going to stay. And then another company saying, man, I'm packing up. I'm moving from BC to Alberta. It's going to create so many interesting. What's that?
But Keith, it's not just inter-provincial. It's also like we've talked about this at length, how there's like massive investment outflows from Canada. It's Canadians leaving with their money. They're leaving the Canadian borders. I think that would accelerate, right? That would just add uncertainty and to the problems that Canada have and further accelerate that trend, right? I mean,
well, say the outcome, Alberta and Saskatchewan, shout out for Saskatchewan. Say they get together and they leave. If I'm an investor with money or a plant in Ontario, for example, and I know the way global flows work and everything, I'm like you say, Rich, I'm saying I'm out of here because Canada, like they're going to lose one of their main contributors to U.S. dollars coming into their system. Like I don't know what else Canada's going to sell with this.
Counterpoint. The rest of Canada's currency would collapse by 50%, and we would be competitive on the global manufacturing market. No.
What are you selling? I don't know.
I don't know. Something maple syrup.
Yeah, we'll make all the trinkets here. The iPhones.
Exactly.
But it's not as simple as we want to stay and you want to go. I just want people to start trying to think of it from a global perspective on how an individual can move, a family can move, a company can move, a foreign investor. Like this is going to create a lot of dominoes. And I'm not suggesting, hey, this is going to be awesome for one group or really bad. It's going to do something, and you just have to figure it out. And I think though on the net, it's not going to be good for the rest of Canada.
It's not good. I would argue it's not good for Alberta, but
I think
Alberta is this really a high probability?
Well.
Let's be honest.
Just to be clear, I think Alberta would do extremely well in this situation. Now people won't like me saying that, but I'm old. I'm one of the old guys,
Rich, correct me if I'm wrong. I would argue that the probability here of Alberta actually leaving is incredibly low.
Yeah, very, very low.
So I just for our listeners, so they're not like panicking.
I think it's very, very low. I think, but again, because of our government's insistence on trying to destroy the single most important industry in our country, and we get emails from people all the time trying to convince me that the current account balance doesn't exist. And I would just encourage people to spend some more time looking up our current account balance, our net exports, and the link to the Canadian dollar. Because without oil, we would be totally effed. And Alberta has 168 billion barrels of oil reserves. And Keith may be right in one way that they would be fine financially. I think having borders and a military and infrastructure and a currency and a central bank and et cetera, might complicate things, but maybe those are just details. Yeah, it's a very, very low probability event. And ultimately, I think it's just about recalibrating the relationship we have with our golden goose, basically, which is they pay for a lot. They pay for a lot of stuff. And maybe we should throw them a couple more Senate seats and a couple of more federal seats and let them build a freaking pipeline if they want to. And I'm sure if we did those three things, people wouldn't be, they wouldn't have their elbows up talking about a referendum. That's my guess. I'm not a political genius like Mark Carney, but I think if they just did that, this would all go away.
There you have it. I think that's a good place to end it. Hopefully, again, moving forward, we can kind of we'll do our best to steer away from the political conversation now that the elections are over, and we'll let our dear leaders navigate this crisis. So, as always, guys, we appreciate the support, and we'll see you next week.